I tell you, there are a lot of people in America who hope you're right. They want to see this president get a big win going forward. And this is breaking news. I'm going to ask you guys to stay with us. The New York Times and NBC, Mercedes and Simon, right now are reporting that President Trump has removed Anthony Scaramucci as his communications director. We are working to confirm that here at Fox News. I hear you laughing, but I have to say, you know, earlier, Mercedes, we were talking on Outnumbered, and we have been all day long as this has been making news on Fox News, with a new person in charge at the White House Chief of Staff, General John Kelly, coming over from the Department of Homeland Security. He would want to have control of his staff. We don't know if this has anything to do to play with Anthony Scaramucci, but we do know that Scaramucci made it very clear last week he would report only to the president.
Well, Harris, it's very clear that John Kelly's coming in with a very new style of leadership. And I think it's very important for John Kelly to make sure he puts people that he feels comfortable working with. And I think that's where you see the difference, where President Trump is going to respect one of his colleagues, someone who actually is closer to his age, someone who he doesn't view as a staffer, but someone who he views as a senior advisor, someone he can trust. And so John Kelly's going to have to be the one to make this call, as he's going to make some significant changes, I think, in that West Wing and across the board.
Having, you know, the history that we do, Simon, recently of just the last 14 or 15 days or so, one thing that Anthony Scaramucci did that was very positive for this president was to lay down the law about how leaks from the White House will not be tolerated, to lay down the law that he loves this president and that this president needs a shoring up and people to have his back.
Yeah, look, I think that I don't know that Secretary Kelly, or now Chief of Staff Kelly, is going to be able to get rid of the chaos of the way that Trump operates. But one thing he can do, I think, is fight very hard to restore the dignity of the office itself. And I think that Scaramucci's comments last week, which were arguably the most disgusting things ever said on the record by any spokesperson of any White House in the modern era of American politics, they were offensive. I mean, my kids read them, right? My teenage kids read the language that he used and asked me about it at dinner, you know, the other night. And I think that Secretary Kelly has an incredible opportunity to help Donald Trump become a dignified, thoughtful leader, which is what I think everyone in both parties wants, that, right? I think we're all a little disappointed with the way that he's conducted himself. Hopefully that's one of the first things that we're going to see, and I think Scaramucci's departure is a step in the right direction.
You know, having worked closely with former President George W. Bush, Mercedes, I'm curious to kind of pick your brain on how things go inside of a White House when a new person comes in, especially as powerful and as important a position now as General Kelly is taking.
Well, during my time, we didn't have these many personnel changes. But I will say that the one thing that Secretary Andy Card, who was our Chief of Staff at the time, taught us is that it is all about humility. It is about the fact that you are serving the American people and this president. And if you get too out of hand or too colorful or feel that you're too important, then there's no room for you in that White House. And I think that is the right approach in managing the West Wing. I think it is to remind everyone who's working in this West Wing that it is an honor, a privilege, but at the same time, it is not about you. It should never be about you. It is about the American people and the work that you have, that you need to get done. So I think that's going to be, I really think that that's where John Kelly is going to go. I think that is his style of leadership, and I think he needs to make those personnel changes. I mean, we saw this during President Reagan's time when we had the Chief of Staff, Howard, when we had one of the Chiefs of Staff basically ask everyone to resign from some of the top positions in the West Wing. I don't think Kelly's going to have to go to that point. There's a lot of talented people in the West Wing, but there needs to definitely be a shift to help make sure that the president is being well served.
You know, one of the criticisms, Simon, and you'll see this, and I'm asking you to wear your bipartisan hat right now, is that sometimes you kind of lose the presence of your party if you bring in too many of your friends. And actually, you could make that very criticism of President Obama, because he brought in a lot of friends from Chicago with him in the very beginning. Does now General John Kelly kind of right the ship with having that voice of the party back in the White House? I mean, you talk about a man who can possibly be bipartisan. It would be a general, perhaps.
Listen, he's clearly a very accomplished person, and I think this is being cast as sort of a restart. which I think the president needs. I mean, he's had very low approval ratings. It's been a bumpy ride for him. And my hope, I think the one danger, the one thing that I'm most nervous about, or I would be most nervous about if I were a Republican right now, is that virtually everybody in a position of authority in the White House is new to politics. And somehow Secretary Kelly has to create more of a blend and a balance of people who've had deep political experience, who know their way around Congress, right, as well as have that outsider kind of vibe that's so important to Trump. And I think that if he doesn't do that, you're going to see, I still think this can end up still being a very bumpy ride in the next few months.
You know, you talk about that first win, Mercedes, and, you know, we don't want to put too fine a point on that because this president has accomplished some things, and this Congress has moved forward with things like Dodd-Frank. You had the Choice Act. I mean, certain things have kind of not been as big as health care, not been as big yet as we could see on the horizon, tax reform. So is now kind of the right time to change some of your messengers? I mean, you see Sarah Huckabee Sanders moving up into that role that Sean Spicer vacated. We don't know what might come next with Anthony Scaramucci. You might be able to fathom a guess or two, but what about the timing of this?
Well, first of all, I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders is doing an excellent job as press secretary. I think actually they have pretty solid communicators. I think that Anthony Scaramucci had a big misstep last week, and that already just tainted Scaramucci. Unfortunately, he was going to go in there and be the tough guy and crack down on leaks. That's obviously something that's incredibly important. I think when you keep hearing the drip, 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 these stories coming out from the White House, the soap opera, the palace intrigue, that should not be the focus of this president. And that is why I think it's been so incredibly frustrating, is that every day you hear a leak coming out. It's like some of those individuals, whether it be in the West Wing or not, they're the ones talking to reporters on a daily basis. And so there's no discipline. There's no message discipline. And I think that becomes incredibly frustrating for a president who is trying to focus on the critical agenda items. And so that's why I think there has been a need for a fundamental shift in the leadership, in this case with the chief of staff, bringing in someone new to basically help gear the ship in the right direction.
You know, part of the challenge for this president, though, has been getting out his message. And now you've seen a couple of communications directors leave in staccato fashion. So you had Dubke, and now you've had Scaramucci, and now we want to go to our John Roberts because we're able to confirm some of this. Simon Rosenberg, Mercedes Schlapp, thank you very much. John Roberts, you're outside the White House, obviously. What have you been able to learn?
Yeah, this comes as a surprise